Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this webinar on studying in the United States of America, with a particular emphasis on what actual American degrees look like. My name is Mark Huntington. I'm the Managing Director of an organization called A-Star Future. What we do is try to encourage British students, predominantly, but not only, to get out and see a bit of the world and to use university as the method for doing just that. Now, obviously, we specialize in opportunities that are available in the English language, not just in English-speaking countries, also in Europe and around the world. But one of the biggest destinations, because of the English language, as much as anything else, is the United States of America. So obviously, it's the most visited page of our website, for example. People want to learn all about studying in the USA. And this is a real life opportunity to learn a little bit more about it. We are joined today by Gouresh Kamble. Gouresh is actually a Brit, a student from the UK who went to the United States a few years back and is now back in the UK. He studied at Green River College, and he'll be adding in a little bit more about his perspective on the things that our other guest, Adam Beals, is going to talk about. Because Adam is the Director of Advising at Green River College. I won't say any more about it. He will introduce the college in just one moment. But the theme of this session is really about what do American degrees look like? Trying to give you a sense as to why they are different from British or other European degrees, and why that's important, and why it's actually, in the right circumstances, a massive advantage over what you can get in Europe. So you're going to learn a lot more about that. We will then throw this open to general question and answer. You will hopefully by now be familiar enough with Zoom to know that there is a Q&R function. You are welcome to put whatever you want in there, be it about American degrees or any other aspect of US higher education, and we'll come back to your questions at the end. But without further ado, I'd like to hand over to you, Adam, to tell us what is an American degree. What does it actually look like?
All right. Thank you very much, Mark. And thank you all for joining us today. As Mark mentioned, I am the Director of International Student Advising at Green River College. So before I jump into more details about the American degree, I'll just quickly give you some more information about Green River. We're located about 40 minutes south of Seattle in the northwestern corner of the US. We have 9,000 students. About 900 of those are international. So international is a big part of who we are. Those students come from more than 59 countries. Seattle's a beautiful city. We have Ocean's End Mountain here. We're famous for big companies like Starbucks, Microsoft, and Amazon. We're all founded in Seattle. We offer 2-year associate degrees, as well as a handful of select 4-year bachelor's degrees. And our specialty is in university transfer. So the majority of our students study with us for 2 years, earn an associate degree, and then transfer to universities all across the US. As you can see in the map here, we send students to the University of California schools on the West Coast, Ivy League schools on the East Coast, and everywhere in between. So what does an American degree look like? It looks like freedom followed by intense focus. So as you can see in this pyramid here, the first 2 years of your study in the US are going to be very broad. You're taking general education classes as well as some intro courses in your major. Then in years 3 and 4, that's when you really focus in on the specific major or subject that you want to study. So what are in general education requirements? What makes up this broad base of the pyramid in your first 2 years? Is going to be an English class, a math class, and this is true regardless of what you plan to study in the US. So even if you're doing art or music, something that doesn't seem very quantitative, you will still have to take at least one college level math class. And then the remainder of your gen eds come from these 3 areas that we have lined out here. The humanities area, and these are creative classes, things like art, music, and classes related to human expression, like literature, philosophy, so forth. You'll also have to take some classes in the social science areas, and these classes study how does society work. So how does it work in terms of economics, in terms of psychology, in terms of business, politics, etc. And then the final component of general education is natural science. And these are the classes that you typically think of when you think science, things like biology, chemistry, physics, classes with a lab component. So just to give you a sense of how universal these gen ed requirements are within the US, we'll take a look at a couple specific universities, starting with one of our most popular transfer destinations. This is the University of California, Los Angeles. So this comes straight from their website, and their general education requirements are arts and humanities, society and culture, scientific inquiry. What you're seeing on the right-hand side here are some of our graduates from Green River who took their general education classes with us, these 3 categories that you see listed here, and then successfully transferred to UCLA after 2 years. Similarly, University of California, Berkeley also requires gen eds. They have slightly different names for them, but they're essentially the same categories. So the classes required here are reading and composition. That's going to be your English. Quantitative reasoning is math. They require a foreign language, as well as classes in those same categories: humanities, social science, and natural science. We've got a picture here of some of our Green River graduates at Berkeley. These are students who did 2 years with us, transferred, and then will get their final years 3 and 4 at Berkeley, finishing up with their bachelor degree from Berkeley. So gen eds are nice because they're an opportunity to explore, and they also give you freedom to change direction. In the US, you're not tracked towards a major from the word go. So you have to take these broad classes, which gives the opportunity to find out, oh, I like something different than what I thought, and then pivot. So for example, you could be starting off as an art student. And as an art student, you still have to take some natural science class. So say you take a chemistry class and you really love it. If you change your major to chemistry, that art class will still count towards those humanities requirements for chemistry. So you haven't lost any time or any money, regardless of what classes you take in your first year in the US, because it's all about exploration. So this is great for students who don't know what major they want to study. It gives you a chance to try a lot of things and figure out what you like. It's also great for students who have a pretty clear sense of what they want to study, because it really gives you more confidence. You've looked around, you've figured out what else is available, and now you're locked in on engineering or business or whatever it may be that you're keen to study. So looking at kind of the chronology of the American bachelor degree, year 1, you're doing exclusively gen eds. In year 2, you're doing those gen ed requirements as well as some intro courses for your major. So say that your major is business. In year 2, that's when you begin to start taking some economics, some accounting, some of those classes that are more traditionally business related. Then in years 3 and 4, that's when you really focus in. So now no more gen eds. If you're a business major, you're probably not going to be taking music in years 3 and 4. Now you're taking just those advanced courses for your major. In years 3 and 4, you'll also have a chance to take a few electives. These are basically free credits that get you up to the total number of credits required to complete your bachelor's degree. So a lot of times American students will use these elective credits to complete a minor. And a minor is an additional concentration with less requirements than the major that allows you to pursue an additional passion. So I've talked a lot so far about the classes that are required for a degree, but American degrees incorporate a lot of learning that takes place outside of the classroom. And I encourage you all to take advantage of these opportunities, including research. Research is a great way to get a leg up on the competition when you're graduating from a university and looking to start your job. At Green River, one of our physics professors hand selects a group of students every year to do cutting edge research on solar panels. So you're seeing one of them right here with one of their specimens. Another thing that universities do a great job of providing for students in the US is networking opportunities. You can see a picture of one of the job fairs that we hosted here on campus. A lot of times employers know that they have a wealth of talent at American universities, so they will come and actively recruit from the campus. So you can go table to table with your resume, talk to employers, and find a job without ever stepping foot off campus a lot of times. Another key component of an American education is employment. And a lot of times these employment opportunities are offered by the schools themselves. In the top right corner here, we see these folks with the cap and gowns. The woman in the middle is Stephanie Scobie, our Senior Director of Marketing, and she's flanked by 2 of our business students who work for her as student marketing assistants. And in doing so, they got valuable skills and experience that helped them step right into a job when they graduated. So that's all the work and business related components of American degrees. And of course, another huge component of American degrees is having fun. Campuses in the US are designed to cater to every desire you can have to allow you to pursue any interest that you want. So really encourage you, in addition to getting good grades, in addition to planning for your future, don't forget to have fun. You've got some pictures here of our students enjoying themselves, whether it be surfing, playing soccer. The photo down in the right-hand corner was at a 5K color run where people run along and get color thrown on them. We're next to Mount Rainier, which is one of the largest volcanoes in the US. So students love to go there for sledding, snowboarding, etc. Um, One of the most valuable things you'll take from college, wherever you attend in the US or abroad, is the relationships and friendships that you have. And those get formed during the course of fun. So do not forget to have fun. As I mentioned, most of our students start off taking a 2-year associate degree before transferring on and doing 2 years at a university for their bachelor's degree. And this does prevent some significant benefits. And 49% of American college students do start off at a 2-year school prior to transferring to a university. And the reason why they choose to pursue that path is you get smaller classes at a college than you do at a university. So as I mentioned, Green River has about 9,000 students total. University of Washington, by comparison, has about 35,000. So at Green River, in your intro psychology class, the size of that class is capped at 30 students. An intro psych class at UW will have 200 or more students. So you're not a face in the crowd at a college. Your instructors will know your name, and you'll be able to ask questions of them as well as your fellow classmates a little more easily in that environment. Another big advantage of the 2+2 path to a bachelor's degree in the US is lower cost. And you can see that here. University of Michigan tuition is $53,000 per year. At Green River, it's just over 10,000. So if you think about that, your 2 years at Green River, you're saving $40,000 per year. That's $80,000 that you saved on your pathway to a 4-year degree. And in the end, the degree you get is the same. So a student who starts off at Green River College or any other 2-year school in the US and then goes on to transfer to University of Michigan gets the same 4-year University of Michigan degree as a student who spent all 4 years there. So that is a broad overview of what degrees look like in the US. Thank you very much. And I'll turn it back to you, Mark.
Oh,
I think
think
you're
Mark's
muted
still
there,
on
Mark.
mute.
I hit the button 3 times and it didn't respond. It has now responded, however. Thank you very much, Adam, for that introduction to American higher education, talking in a little bit more depth about what degrees are actually made up of. So that gives a sense as to who Green River are and how your degrees are constructed. But my first question to you really does come back to the international student arriving on your campus. Because for a British student going to university here, if they sign up for a degree in psychology, for example, they are already going to know roughly exactly which classes they're going to take for the entire 3 years they are there with near certainty. A little bit of flexibility perhaps around certain minors or other electives that they could do, but it's all pretty much a roadmap that they can follow. When they arrive at an American university, that's clearly kind of the opposite, isn't it? So how do you help students deal with that?
Yeah, great question. So there is a lot of choice, and we want to make sure that students are making guided choices to get them on the degree so they're not wasting time or money. So at Green River, we have a large international student advising team, and each of those advisors specializes in a major area. So for example, if you know broadly you want to work in healthcare, we have a science advisor who can, within all those gen ed requirements, help you choose the classes that are most related and will give you the best taste of that field to confirm that that's really what you want to do.
Right. So you will have somebody kind of hold your hand through this initial settling in process, and I guess it becomes more obvious over time. Um, One thing I did want to ask as well is a question we get quite a lot around American higher education relating to professional degrees in
Mhm.
things like law and medicine. How would this general how does this general education approach work when these are obviously hugely specialized qualifications in the first place?
Yeah, so in the US, those degrees that you're talking about, whether it be medicine or law, those are graduate degrees. So at the bachelor's level, you would study a related field. So for medicine, it's typically a natural science field like biochemistry, biology, and that will meet all the prerequisites for medical school. Then upon completing your 4-year bachelor's degree, you would take the entrance exam for medical school, which is called the MCAT, and then go on to do your medical training as well as residency.
Right. But if you had a student who had that as their longer term goal, would that be something you'd build into their first year and second year classes with you? And how does that work?
Yes, absolutely. So if that was a long-term goal, we would put the student on a track towards a natural science degree of some kind, be it biology or chemistry. We would build in all of the prerequisites for medical school, which are biology, chemistry, physics, usually a year of calculus. And then by virtue of completing that bachelor's degree, they've done everything they need to do to then go on to medical school.
Right. And my next question is really one related to, shall we say, the monolingual status of both the United States and the United Kingdom these days, and relates to foreign languages. Obviously, I'm guessing to get an associate's degree from you after 2 years, there is no foreign language requirement per se, but I'm guessing a lot of your transfer schools demand it. Is that still a fair comment, or is it becoming less common?
Yeah, that's a great question. So you are correct that the universities in many cases require a foreign language of people from a monolingual English background, like you and me. So it's not necessarily required at the associate degree level. However, any foreign language requirement will count as a humanities class for the associate degree. So if we hear that students are saying, hey, I'm interested in going to this school, then we can encourage them, well, make sure you take Spanish along the way so that you've got that out of the way before you transfer to the university.
Right, but if they hadn't taken advantage of doing the language with you, would that mean that they wouldn't be able to transfer to certain schools?
It's not an admission requirement, it's a graduation requirement
So
at the
they'd have to do it
university.
after they got there. They'd only be
That's
delaying the inevitable.
that's it. Yeah, there's no way around it. And if you wait to take it, you pay the higher university tuition rate for that class versus the college rate. So you're saving yourself a little money if you just bite the bullet and do it early.
So you might be better off getting it out of the way as a general education requirement with you, and then earning credits in more specialist fields by the time you get to your years 3 and 4.
Exactly
Okay.
right.
Right. I'd like to bring Gouresh in at this point, because obviously, Gouresh, you've been through all of this, so hopefully
Yes.
you knew all of this.
Yes.
What I'd like to ask you a little bit about is the actual experience of being guided, being advised through the process. Was it Adam who actually did it for you, or somebody else?
No. Yeah. So Adam had just kind of entered Green River as I was leaving, but everything that he said about advising, like, held true back then. So I mean, if it's still there now, it's probably even better. But back then when I went, I think in 2014, I did have an advisor who helped me with my academic planning, and then I also had one of the people that recruited me help me as well. So I was just able to go into the office, book a meeting, and sit down with an advisor one-to-one, and they would help me throughout, kind of just reassuring me that the classes I was taking are correct, I guess, in what I wanted to do. Because my mind changed a lot. My mind changed a lot when I was there. So,
well, that's a great feature of American higher education, isn't it? One of the main benefits of the UK is that you can change your mind. Do also there are limits, but that there's not nearly as many limits or as negative consequences as there are in the UK. Should you
exactly
mind? But I do want to ask you, just to get a sense of this, Gouresh, what would you say was the most unlikely general education class you took based on your profile as a student in the UK? And that's related, which of the general education requirements do you feel you really got the most out of?
So I think this class could almost answer both of them. I took an art class, and where I had to design and draw. At this point, I knew I wanted to become a political science student. So I was taking an art class where I learned how to just draw, I guess. And I didn't want to completely switch my major from just doing this art class, but it really, it unlocked something in me, like, oh, I can do other things. Like, I'm not just someone that's going to study one thing only in life and then continue with that. It made me feel like I was more rounded as a student rather than just someone singular.
Right. Okay. Well, thanks for that, Gouresh. I mean, obviously, if anybody's got any questions about wanting to study at Green River College, you've got two people here who can tell you all about that. We've clearly invited people along here as well to ask anything they want about the United States of America. Hopefully by now you've gotten a bit more of a sense about how the degrees work. And we always want to bring it back to that point, because it's really, really easy to get excited about going to study in the USA, and really, really easy to get yourself halfway down the journey before you even realize that actually when you get there, it's not quite going to be the same as what you would have gotten elsewhere. And for some people, sometimes I think you do need to, take a step back perhaps. And actually, Adam, this is a bit of a surprise. I wasn't even planning on mentioning this when I started this webinar as well. But because of that adaptation, if you like, one of the things that Green River has that I've always found really interesting is the whole gap year program. Could you say a bit more about how that works and how that helps students perhaps understand US higher ed?
Yeah, absolutely. So gap year is something that students typically take advantage of in the year between their high school and starting at a university. And we have programs that allow students to come to Green River for varying durations of time, as little as 3 months, as long as a full year, and take classes with us to kind of confirm their interests. Again, do some of that exploration that American schools really excel at. And students also have the option of combining study in the US at Green River with study at different locations around the world. So we have a partner institution in Australia. The photo actually you saw surfing was one of our students who was in Australia for a term, studying abroad over there. We have a partnership in Hawaii and California. So it's a great opportunity to get a feel for different institutions, get a feel for different parts of the US and the world, and also get a feel for really what are your interests before you dive into a university program in an environment that might be a little more tracked and might not allow as much freedom and exploration.
Right. So it kind of serves two purposes there, doesn't it? It's like one foot in the door if you want to stay in America. And, if all you really want is the whole social side of things, like, hey, you're getting all of that in a package as a gap year, and then, reconsider again when you decide where you want to go study. So I think that these are interesting alternatives to just signing up to doing a full 4-year degree in the United States. Now, actually, I'd now like to open this up and come on to Q&A. Please do start putting your questions into the chat or the Q&A section. And this first one that we've got is actually quite a good question. I'm going to come to you on this first, Adam, and then I'm going to say some things, and I suspect Gouresh might as well.
Yep.
Because of the general education years and therefore time limitations, is there a difference in detail and depth of the course content in comparison to British universities?
Yeah, that is a great question. I don't believe there's any difference in detail and depth. I think part of this is offset by the fact that we're 4-year degrees versus 3-year degrees primarily. So in those first 2 years, that's when there's a little more gen eds. And in the final 2 years, you really do have intense focus in your major that I think is equivalent to what you would have in the UK. But Mark, you probably have more expertise than I do in that.
I would agree with you to a point, and then in certain other ways, perhaps not quite so much. I mean, you're absolutely right in terms of the intensity of the study. You are putting in hours. It is going to be focused in the little areas that it is. But naturally, if you've done a degree that's 100% biology versus one that's 30% biology, 30% maybe chemistry, and 40% everything else under the sun, you might actually reach a point where you arrive at graduation day where your knowledge in that particular field is not perhaps as deep as it would have been had you just dedicated 3 years of your life to it. As Adam pointed out, that extra year compensates to a certain extent, and the benefits of interdisciplinarity are also something that are more broadly understood, I would say, by elite universities all around the world these days. So you could very easily make the case that here's a checklist of all the things that have been covered as modules and all of that, and you would find that an American degree might, in certain circumstances, look inferior or not as much. But by the time you add up all the additional classes that students have taken, all the additional perspective that they will have gained from those things, I don't honestly see that there's any major difference. But it is absolutely fair, and we've been making this point all along, that British or European degrees by and large are not the same as American degrees. Does that mean they're easier or less rigorous? No, but they are different, and that does mean that the outcomes can be slightly different. And again, this is something that I often advise people on in the UK, because we get this question quite a lot. It's not really the people who struggle with this interdisciplinary approach. It's more the ones who start bargaining with you straight away. It's when you talk to them and they say, I want to go and do psychology in the USA. That's great. You do realize you're going to have to do math. Well, okay, there's statistics. You do realize you're going to have to do a language. Really? You do realize you're going to have to do all this, that, and the other. But what if I really don't want to do a language? Well, if you really, really don't want to do a language and it's a prerequisite, don't go. It's the only conclusion to reach. You are not going to be able to bargain your way out of these things. So it's like, take it for what it is, embrace the whole experience. And if it isn't what you want, to be honest, sometimes I'd recommend to people, maybe a bachelor's degree in the UK and then go and do a master's degree in the States might be a more appropriate way around that particular challenge. So, it is different. And I do hope that people appreciate these differences before they sign up for it. Let's put it that way. But I don't think I'd be speaking out of turn if I said that this more interdisciplinary liberal arts and sciences approach is having a moment. It is coming back into favor, even in the United Kingdom. You will see more and more British universities offering liberal arts degrees. And I'm now going to bring Gouresh in on this point because he actually did liberal arts in Europe after the US.
Yes, yeah, that's true. So I did 2 years at Green River, and then I transferred those credits to a university in Netherlands. And in Netherlands as well, I mean, we had to do still a bit of general education classes, even though at this point I was starting to specialize in my bachelor's degree as well.
Yeah, but you were at University College Roosevelt, which is one of the Dutch liberal arts colleges.
Exactly, and it's got a very American style of education as well. So they even at the specialization, a lot of my classes were specializing, but there were still classes where I was like, okay, I can see why I'm taking it, but it's not related to my study. But I was that was already drilled into me by that point, so I didn't mind doing that.
That was just part of the deal for you. You didn't.
Part of the deal, yeah.
Okay, it's good. And I'm sure you will have got something out of it.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
You know, from your own experience and generally just from being alive a bit, you know, it's like things that don't necessarily appear relevant on the day, 10, 15 years later, you're like, oh yeah, now I get it.
Yeah.
And so
I think that
somebody's 25, oh, I wasted so much time at university. It's like, tell me again when you're 40, you know, it's like,
yeah,
that's the approach. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
The kind of perspective I'm able to offer that maybe not everybody on this call has just yet. Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's again, the whole point of this session is just to drill in just how different American higher education can be.
Definitely.
But I'd now like to move on just to a slightly different area, Adam, while we've got you, and to look at things like entry requirements with American universities. And I don't mean specifically just in terms of Green River, although please do touch on that. I'm interested to get your impression of a question that comes up a lot. What on earth is going on with the SATs and ACTs right now? Are they going to come back post-COVID, or are they finished? What's your take on that?
Yeah, my take is that a lot of universities will abandon them permanently. I think there was kind of some discontent around those tests that was sort of simmering prior to COVID in terms of equitable outcomes, people of different backgrounds being disadvantaged in taking those tests. And so they were recognized as problematic before COVID. Now COVID has hit and the tests just aren't being offered, or they're not easily accessible. So universities aren't requiring them. And I think they're finding out that we're still getting great applicants. We're still getting smart students, even though we don't have this proxy test for their ability. So really, what is the point? You know, it's a screening process that isn't really benefiting our institution. So I don't think they will come back at large numbers of institutions across the US.
Right. I mean, I have seen that the University of California system is perhaps the most famous example of people just going, are they test optional now and going to test blind in a couple of years' time, or is it already rejecting tests? I can't remember.
It's test blind. Yeah, so if you submit it, that will not be a factor in their initial decision.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that is starting to happen, and you are going to see more and more of this. So that is, I mean, certainly it's encouraging more applicants to a wider range of American universities. I think, you know, US universities will mostly be reporting greater numbers of applicants this year, which is not necessarily great news. When you think about Harvard or Stanford, you know, they now accept 3% rather than 4% of the people who apply. It's like, well, that's a giant waste of a lot of people's time and effort, isn't it? But the good thing about it is because the tests were, well, let's put it this way, there's a greater correlation between your parents' income and your performance on the SAT than there is any other single variance. So removing that from the equation means that the universities are actually happier because they're getting a wider range of candidates applying, people who never would have bothered in the past. Now that it's test blind, test neutral, or test optional, they are starting to apply. And I think universities are appreciating that this helps them meet whatever diversity targets they have. So I think they will die a death. I think the SAT2s have already gone, haven't they? The subject tests, they're already history now, I think.
That's right, largely, yeah.
Right, so if you ever hear about SAT2s, you're probably not going to have to worry about those at all. But just to come back to Green River, you never did require the SATs, did you?
We didn't know, so our requirements are simply proof of English proficiency, which tends to not be a barrier for students from the UK.
I didn't have a problem, yeah.
Yeah, so if you can take the TOEFL IELTS, or we have other English proficiency methods like A level, O level, If your English is sound, you're welcome to come to us. And in fact, you don't even have to have finished high school or secondary school in the UK. We have a high school completion program where students can come to us as young as 16 years old and take college classes that count both towards the associate degree at the college level and towards a Washington State high school diploma.
Which, to be honest, I think is great if you're planning on staying in the US forever. If you're planning on coming back to the UK, yeah, having the absence of A-levels on your CV, maybe not the smartest move.
Yeah.
But I can understand that it is possible there. I know it's quite common in the States to do first year of college alongside last year of high school. So I do take your point on that it's an effective way of managing your time, and certainly appeals to international students, from more of an Asian direction, perhaps from a European one. But yeah, it's a good thing to do. Please do keep any other questions that you've got coming in. I can't remember. I had something just go straight through my head that I wanted to ask you, Adam. Let me see. Anything else you feel people should know while I'm thinking about this? Any comments on anything that's been said?
Well, I'd circle back to what you said about the gap year, Mark, and how you mentioned that can be a dual purpose. You can get this experience, figure out what you want to do, and then go back to university in Europe. However, all those classes that students take in the US during the course of their gap year can be counted towards an associate degree. And so we see a lot of times students who come over with the initial intent of studying for just 3 months, kind of get their foot wet, but then they fall in love with the US. Yeah, Gouresh, you want to speak to this?
I was supposed to be there for 3 months, and I ended up staying like 2.5 years. So
Good.
Yeah, and as a result, all those gap year classes, which were, I think, a little bit of a lark, right, at the beginning, ended up advancing you towards your degree.
They ended up counting. Yeah, I think I did public speaking. That improved my confidence so much.
Yeah, we just had a student graduate who received our International Student Award that goes to one top graduate every year. She was from the Netherlands, came for 1 quarter, took our natural resources program. So was spending a lot of class time out in the forest on campus, loved the classes, loved the environment, stayed for 2 years, got her associate's degree, decided to stick around for 4 years for a bachelor's degree. So people really fall in love with the US and the learning style over here, I think.
No, that's good. I mean, that happens, I guess, for a lot of people. Once they dip their toe in, they decide absolutely this is the right thing for them. And great that you've got that flexibility and the ability to just seamlessly progress throughout their education. So I think that's tremendously valuable. The one other category of things I did want to ask you about, Adam, and again, I wanted to, you touched on this a little bit in your presentation, is more the whole financial reality with regards to the US for international students. I mean, clearly this is not an impulse purchase, is it? It's something that you have to give some thought to for most people. I guess there might be the odd one or two who can just spring for the cost of an entire US degree without thinking twice, but I doubt there's many on this call. So, I mean, would you have any general pointers you could suggest to UK international students with regards to the finances and managing that, and scholarships, if those are relevant in any way?
Yeah, so I think a huge tip would be to consider starting at a 2-year school. If you're thinking about coming for a full degree, you just have massive savings guaranteed if you attend to college for 2 years and then transfer to university. In terms of scholarships, those tend to be more readily available for international students at private universities. Some of the ones you mentioned, like Harvard, some of the big name schools, but there's a smattering of private universities all across the US. And those schools are not beholden to educating local students to the same extent. So a state school like University of Washington, for example, is receiving a lot of its funding from Washington State, and therefore has an obligation to provide discounted education to students from Washington. Private universities tend to be a little more equitable in terms of their distribution of scholarships, of financial aid across the whole spectrum of students, American and international.
But doesn't that then mean that it's the really expensive universities that come down to merely expensive, whereas the moderately expensive stay moderately expensive? So in terms of a real saving, it's not absolutely clear that there's much to be gained over going public or private, in most cases. Okay, sometimes obviously there are some really generous awards out there. But Adam, bringing this back more to a Green River College perspective, you have a lot of students who do the 2 years with you. They're paying roughly $10,000 a year for fees, and then they go on to TwoYear to complete their 2 years in, really quite well-known universities largely. So presumably, yes, there is a hike in what they would pay, but to what extent do your transfer students get scholarships, would you say? Or could you illustrate perhaps a really good deal that a student of yours got last year without naming names or anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So one kind of exception to what I just mentioned in terms of universities that are public being stingy with scholarships is Central Washington University, which is about an hour east of us. They have guaranteed scholarships for students who hit certain grade average thresholds. So that's nice because it gives predictability for students in terms of what their final bill will be before they even apply to the university. So we had a student who graduated from Green River with a very high GPA, transferred to Central Washington, and ended up actually paying less there than she would have had she stuck around for our very affordable bachelor's degree. So it can happen that students get this really generous financial aid.
So that would be what, a case where the entire 4-year tuition fee bill was below $40,000, something
And
like.
it's right around there. Yeah, about 10 grand per year.
Well, I mean, in a UK context, that's actually cheaper than studying here, pretty much. So, it's like, I mean, obviously that's an isolated example, but it's an accessible example, yeah? It's not something that couldn't be replicated next year.
No. So this scholarship from Central Washington is available to any student who hits this GPA threshold. So it's not like it's super competitive or selective. This is something that anybody can access with the right grades.
Okay, so go to Green River, study really, really hard, and then maybe, you might be able to get your 4-year degree there for a lot less than you might be expecting. But I mean, again, the financial reality of it, I mean, we get a lot of questions about scholarships, particularly sporting scholarships. And, it's not an area I feel really confident talking about in too much detail, but they're not the only ones out there. The vast majority of scholarships are academic merit type awards. So, if a university is going to give you money, it's because they like you for some reason. And the reason they like you is probably academic. I mean, I don't, again, Adam, I'd like to get your take on this, but I have heard recently that American universities are moving away from this kind of, sort of more well-rounded, holistic individual to the more kind of talented specialist rather than the kind of generalist approach that's more traditionally associated with the US. So if you've got a particular specialism, even though you're going to do a general degree, that's the kind of thing that American universities now are rewarding with scholarship cash. I don't know if that.
Yeah, I would say if you're going to apply to some of these really competitive, really elite universities, then being able to highlight some kind of specialty that you have is a big advantage because everybody else applying is going to have perfect grades as well. So how do you stand out from the crowd? You can stand out by having significant lab experience if you're going to be a science student, or if you're an exceptional athlete, that can help too. But yeah, my advice to students who are hoping to get into these top universities would be find a passion and really pursue it actively and be able to speak about it in an interesting way. Because you're right, at these top universities, they're looking to create a very diverse student body, and they want that diversity to come in part because of the talent and the specialization that you bring.
Right. And one other thing that, I mean, I'm putting you on a spot here based on something that one of your colleagues told me many, many years ago, I think. I might be remembering incorrectly, but as I understand it, if you're looking at getting into an elite US university, and again, the Ivies might be a slight exception to this, but UCLA, Berkeley, or something like that, statistically, your chances are higher as an international student if you are a 2+2 transfer out of a community college than if you are just applying out of a high school in the UK or wherever. Is that accurate?
It's hard to make a broad generalization about that, but yes, the applicant pool of transfer students tends to be smaller than the applicant pool of initial applicants who are coming fresh out of high school. So just in terms of the sheer numbers that you're competing with, definitely there's fewer. However, there's also fewer spots available to transfer students than to first-year students. So I'm not exactly sure where that all comes out in balance.
Okay. I mean, it's one of those things. I'm sure we could all argue it from every different angle. But as far as, I mean, I would say that, going to a 2-year college does not in any way reduce your chances of getting into an elite 4-year university in the US, might actually enhance them. And actually, as you were saying before, smaller class sizes, more personal involvement in, designing your general education requirements. This can actually lead to a better prepared student who's going to do better in years 3 and 4 at a degree than a student who goes all the way through the 4 years at a 4-year school. Would that?
Yeah, exactly right. I think universities see a student who's come to the US and studied for 2 years as kind of proof of concept, right? You've demonstrated that you can thrive in this environment, you can adapt to these learning expectations. And so you're a pretty sure bet as far as the university is concerned. If you excelled at a college, they expect you to excel there, and they'll likely be happy to admit you.
Right. Well, thank you very much, Adam, for all of that, for your input and insight. There are no other questions. So I am going to suggest that we leave that there. Thanks very much for those of you who joined us this evening. I will be sending out an email with a few links to some of the things that Adam, Gouresh, and myself have mentioned, along with access to a recording of this webinar, which will be on YouTube at some point in the near future. But yes, I'd like to thank Gouresh for coming along. And again, all I will say is to anybody British on this call, in the email tomorrow, I'm going to be sending out my email address and Gouresh's. He will talk to anybody in the UK who's interested in learning more about Green River. So, you know, if you've got any questions that you'd like to ask him, quite aside from, you know, what we've been able to learn this evening, and you'd rather do that privately, yeah, he's done that for lots of other people. He'll do it for you as well. I am sure. Okay, well, thank you very much, Gouresh. Thank you. It's been a very useful session, I hope, for those of you who've joined us. And good evening.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you all.
Thank you.